All right. Um, this is Brian, and I'm making a video here about a situation with a guy that lost partial engine power, and he landed at my shop, and he wanted me to fix it. I wouldn't say this is the worst nightmare story of what's about to follow here, but it's pretty bad. It's not a good um, story from the mechanic's perspective. I guess from the power loss in the air situation, it was probably it wasn't good all around from whoever's looking at it. So let me just tell you about it. He was flying a 150 M Mike model, and that's what it looked like. And I blocked out the tail number. And so he shows up, and he wants me to figure out why he is not getting full power. And so first thing I do is take off the cowl and just look at the engine. I have seen 150s, 152s have cylinders just be completely separated, and the squawk was, it's running rough. So I was kind of expecting to see a cylinder not attached anymore, but it wasn't that bad. There was no cylinders detached, and there was actually nothing majorly wrong that I could see, except for the mixture cable was not going to full rich, and it was also using those little I don't know if they're Bowden clamps, the clamps that are normally on the engine mounts, and if they get all oily or if they're the wrong size, they're loose. So the mixture cable was all jacked up, and I was like, okay, well, if it's running too lean at high power, then maybe it's cutting out at high power because it's too lean. So I rigged up the mixture, tightened it all up. We did a ground run and no change at all. And this was actually the first time I had seen the problem for myself. And it was an unusual problem. So what's the next slide? Well, I guess I'll say early on, it's in the next slide. So it ran totally fine, started up totally fine, and then as soon as you run up to 1900 RPM, very consistently at 1900, the cylinder number 1 on the engine monitor would drop off completely, and it would start running very rough, and lots of clacking sounds and not very good. But I'm getting ahead. So fix the mixture. Next thing we decided was to do a borescope, and also I think we did compressions also. And the spark plugs looked fine, no fouling, and also it was running totally fine up until 1900 RPM. Everything looked fine. So starting to not be great. Because troubleshooting, I guess my goal is to be very methodical and only fix things that are broken, and starting with the easiest, least expensive thing first. So it seemed to me like it was an ignition problem, or most likely an ignition problem. I'm not able to regurgitate how a magneto works, but Faraday's law and coils and points and things. So I thought maybe there's something weird with one of the coils or something like that. And at high RPM, maybe the spark is not good. Maybe the lead or the little metal parts in the magneto that deliver to cylinder number 1 are worn or arcing or something weird. So I decided to pull off the magnetos. And when I got the magnetos off, both coils were testing outside of the limits in the slick manual. And also both points were somewhat pitted. And one of the mags was extremely old. I think it was, I can't remember right now, but the series that got superseded by 4300. So I think it was a 4200 series mag that was just very old. And these coils are like $700, and a set of points is like 120. So a new mag is like 1500. So instead of doing the coil and points on on the super old mag that didn't have an impulse coupling, put a new magneto on, and also on the one that did have the impulse coupling, that was the newer style mag, we just put a new coil and a new set of points. And everything else looked pretty good in there. But the coils, I mean, all right, well, we put them back on and it didn't fix anything. Exactly the same problem. So, next thing, we make sure the probe is on the correct cylinder. That picture is just me heating up the one probe on the one cylinder, making sure it's reading on the right cylinder. Rotate the spark plugs even though there's nothing wrong with them. And then we took off a rocker and took out the plungers, make sure that they weren't bleeding down or collapsed. Check the valve clearances, make sure the push rods weren't bent. And I also pulled the carburetor screen and the gasculator screen. And nothing wrong. I guess maybe I'm also making this video because if anybody ever sees this, I'm wondering what else would you have done at this point? Because I numbered these throughout the slides. We're on now. I've done 10 things trying to figure out this issue, and I'm starting to run out of things because we started with the magnetos. Well, we started with the mixture. I saw something wrong, so I fixed it. And then somewhat less invasive as just doing a 500-hour magneto inspection. Saw something wrong, fixed it. These are all relatively easy things to do. So I did these things, did not see anything wrong. And the thing I wish I had, but I didn't have, it was on order, was a high tension lead tester. And I tested all the leads. It turns out the number one lead was not solid. And there is another video that I put in the description of testing that lead. And when I tested that lead, I thought, oh, dude, we got fixed it. We found the problem. But we ended up waiting for a harness, just replaced the whole harness. And that was on the same magneto that we had already replaced. So now it's got a new new harness on the right side. And on the left side, it already had a new mag with a relatively new harness. And it's got a new coil and a new points. And it still didn't fix it. So the ignition system is good. And while we were waiting, I forget exactly the order of this all happened, but while we were waiting for something, it went and got some avionics work done at a separate place. And they tested it further, and they thought of something, the ignition switch. So they removed the P leads to isolate the ignition switch, and that didn't fix it either. So now we've done 12 things. And we're running out of options. So, there's compression, ignition, and fuel. I already checked the fuel screens. I already did a borescope. Already checked compression. Already checked the plungers. Checked the push rods. And the only thing I can't see is the cam. So I'm like, well, maybe something with the cam. I mean, unlikely, but what the heck else am I going to do? So, or the theory was, and also at this point, it says second, third, and fourth opinions. I'd been talking to multiple other people about trying to get ideas on what they thought could be the problem. So, however it comes about, we decided that the thing that seems somewhat likely is that the valves are not working right. They're not opening, closing right once it hits a high RPM. So I pulled off the cylinder and took it to some guys that had this tool in the picture. And we made sure that the springs were getting the proper pounds of force per inch of deflection that it says in the manual. And we also lapped the valves. We also, checked the guides. Cylinder seemed fine. And then I also put it in a new set of plungers, even though the plungers seemed fine also. So put the cylinder back on and still broken. Still at the same RPM, 1900 RPM. This thing cuts out. Only on cylinder number 1. So now I'm at a complete loss. I don't know. And all these other people I'm talking to also don't know. And even though me and the owner both think it's highly unlikely a new cylinder is going to fix this. I mean, this airplane's either totaled or we got to try something. So nobody's got any better ideas. So we're going to just eliminate everything to do with the cylinder. So we put a cylinder, new push rods, new plungers, new rockers, new shafts, new piston, just everything to do with cylinder number one. Because we've already done that with the ignition system. Short of, with at least one completely new mag and new harness, it should at least fire on one plug, even though the other one's only got a new coil and new points. The ignition system is out of the question. We've already replaced all the parts. So now I just think it's in the valve train. I think that's the most likely thing because the fuel seemed fine. And also, none of the other cylinders were having an issue. It was just cylinder number one. So, according to the engine monitor. So, anyways, the cylinder was on back order for a long time. And it actually showed that it was going to be only like 28 days or something. And then they changed it on the 28th day to another freaking 2 months or something crazy. But during that time, the engine monitor data was sent to another company, and apparently they had nothing to say. I don't know. I guess they said, I don't know. So we wait, and I go do other projects while we're waiting for this cylinder. So we finally get the cylinder. And that was thanks to the owner actually tracked down his own cylinder. And good for him. Because we found the issue faster. So I have the new cylinder. I pull off the other cylinder again, but like we said, we don't think this cylinder is going to fix it. And it's really, anyways, so I decide that I want to take pictures of everything, every step of this process. So later when this owner wants to sue me for, running up his bill to thousands and thousands of dollars and still not fixing his problem, at least I have pictures that other people can look at and say that, there's nothing wrong. As I'm taking these pictures, I don't know if you see it on this page, unless you know what you're looking at, but wait a second. What's in that carburetor? Oh, no. Oh, darn. So a piece of the flapper valve material had come off and lodged itself in the carburetor. And that was our problem. I don't know where the other pieces went. Maybe it fell out the bottom of the airbox, or maybe it got ingested and burned up in the cylinder and came out the exhaust. Or one of the cylinders, or I don't know, maybe it's in one of the other cylinders. I don't really know, but I checked the tubes. I used, I believe I put a borescope down there. I also used a bunch of mirrors and things. I couldn't find the other portion of that. But, yeah. So decided to repair it using McFarlane parts. And that's the story. That's it. So it seems kind of uneventful, and looking back on it, that was the 15th thing. My 15th thing was taking pictures to try and prove I'm not an idiot. And the first time I had the cylinder off and I had the exhaust and the airbox off, I should have looked up inside the carburetor. I don't know why I didn't, but I did not look up there. So I didn't catch it the first time the cylinder was off. And, looking back, it's a lot easier looking back. I guess it's easier looking forward too, because now I know, this is something that I'll look at forever. I actually put it on my annual checklist now. That is now an item specifically when I'm changing an air filter. I now must look up into the venturi of the carburetor. And obviously, when you have the air filter off, you should be looking at the flapper valve material also. And there's a whole bunch of ADs on older air filters. Most of them are the latest revision at this point. But yeah, so air, fuel. Just because you check the fuel screens does not mean your fuel system is doing good, because air is a part of it. And yeah, I had looked for intake leaks, but it didn't exhibit signs of intake leaks. It makes total sense now, except for the only thing that doesn't make sense is, I guess, the way the air flows through the intake manifold. Allow that particular blockage only showed up on cylinder number 1. As far as the engine monitor goes and the temperatures, the only one that failed to fire was cylinder number 1. So that's that story. The further discussion is, if you go back and you look at this airbox, and maybe this should be a different topic, but the engine is a O-320 on a 150. So it's an STC'd engine with a totally different airbox than a original 150. And the McFarlane parts don't go on a 150. Their eligibility list is not does not include the 150. So in order to install the McFarlane parts, I always just do the thing that's just the safe thing, as far as doing the right thing if you're not sure. So I just got a field approval for a major alteration to install the parts, because the 150 wasn't on the list, and it was pretty easy to get a field approval for it. It's about 2 emails and a very simple process. But once again, if anybody watches this, which nobody probably will, but you could go ahead and give your opinion on whether you think it's a minor alteration or a major to use non-OEM parts for a basically installing a McFarlane kit when the airplane is not on the eligibility kit, or the PMA. The PMA applies to installing parts on airplanes that are on the eligibility list. So, that's it. Have a great day.